The word sliced through the chamber like a knife. Harris leaned into her microphone, her tone firm and voice laced with authority. "Sit down." Boy, the room froze. A few nervous laughs broke the silence while others stared, wide-eyed and stunned. The phrase wasn't casual. It was meant to belittle, to silence, to remind Kennedy of his place. Yet he didn't flinch. He stayed composed, his expression steady as stone. And when he finally spoke, his response wasn't loud, but it was devastating. The chamber fell still. Outside those walls, the nation seemed to hold its breath. Stay tuned, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Because his reply was a moment few will forget. The hearing had started as a policy discussion. It quickly became personal. The Senate floor buzzed with cameras, journalists, and restless aides. On the agenda was a major hearing on judicial nominations, expected to be routine, firm questions, quick rebuttals, and the usual political performance. But from the instant Vice President Kamala Harris took a seat at the dais, the mood shifted. She sat upright, her voice clear as she directed her questions across the room. Her tone carried not only the weight of her office, but also unmistakable authority. Facing her was Senator John Kennedy, calm, composed, his notes neatly arranged .at first. The exchange was sharp but civil. Harris pressed hard. Kennedy countered with wit. Then the rhythm broke. The tension rose. Kennedy's points hit closer to home, and Harris's tone grew sharper. Then came the spark. Kennedy leaned forward slightly, his southern drawl measured. "Madam Vice President, I believe the American people aren't looking for speeches tonight. They are looking for straight answers." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Harris's lips curved faintly. Adjusting her MIC, she leaned closer and delivered the line that would ignite the room. "Sit down." Boy, the air cracked. Aides in the gallery exchanged uneasy glances. Some smirked, others froze. Reporters scribbled frantically, capturing every word. The phrase didn't just sting. It echoed with layers of meaning. Heavy with history, Kennedy didn't blink. He didn't move. He simply looked up from his notes, fixing his eyes on Harris. His calm became its own response. The silence stretched long enough for the chair to consider intervening, until Kennedy spoke first, steady and deliberate. The insult was meant to end him. Instead, it defined the moment. The chamber still hummed with the shock of Harris's words. "Sit down." Boy, aides traded looks, some uncertain, some tense, unsure if they had witnessed dominance or disaster. Cameras zoomed in on Kennedy's face. Harris leaned back, confident she had taken control, cutting him off before his argument could land. To many. It looked final, a clear victory. But Kennedy didn't react. No anger, no retort, just calm resolve. Resting his hands on the desk, he spoke evenly. "Madam Vice President, I've been called a lot of things in this chamber. But tonight, I think the American people just learned something about you." The room stirred again. Reporters' pens hit the page. Pens scratched furiously. The gavel struck once for order, but its echo was swallowed by the low rumble spreading through the gallery. Harris's eyes narrowed. "Senator, don't twist my words." Kennedy leaned in slightly, his tone steady but cutting. "I don't need to twist them. They landed just fine on their own." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Miller's earlier smirk disappeared. Even senators seated on Harris's side shifted uneasily. Harris straightened, trying to reassert control. "Senator, this chamber isn't for your theatrics. It's for governing." Kennedy's reply came slow and deliberate, each word precise. "Then govern, Madam Vice President. Don't command. Don't belittle. If you have answers, give them. But don't think a two-word insult counts as leadership." The gallery stirred again. A staffer leaned toward another and whispered, "That's the clip." Harris's jaw tensed. She looked down at her notes, then back at Kennedy, but the impact of his calm word had already changed the energy in the room. If she thought her remark was a final blow, what came next proved otherwise. The tension hung thick as Kennedy reached into his folder. Slowly, he drew out a sheet of paper, laying it flat on the desk in front of him. "Madam Vice President," he began evenly, "you just told me to sit down. But in 2019, when you were running for president, you said in Oakland, we need more voices at the table, not fewer. Everyone deserves to be heard." He paused. "That's your quote." The gallery gasped again. Reporters underlined the date as their cameras zoomed tight on Harris's expression. Kennedy tapped the paper once with his finger. "Yet tonight, you call me boy and tell me to sit down. Which Kamala Harris should the American people believe? The one who said every voice matters, or the one who just tried to silence mine? A low murmur rolled through the chamber like thunder. Even the chairman froze, gavel raised midday. Harris leaned forward, her tone sharp, trying to regain footing. Senator, context matters. That statement was about inclusion, not disruption. Kennedy didn't hesitate. His response came calm, with a hint of edge. Inclusion that excludes uncomfortable voices isn't inclusion, it's performance. The crowd stirred louder this time. A staffer scribbled in his notes, direct contradiction, her words versus tonight. Harris's jaw clenched. She flipped through her papers, searching for ground to stand on, but the silence of the room pressed heavier with each second. Kennedy leaned back, his folder now closed, eyes fixed on hers. The damage was already done. The contradiction was undeniable. Her insult had drawn laughter. His rebuttal drew silence that silence. The balance of power shifted. Senators who had laughed quietly at sit-down, boy, now avoided the cameras. What had felt like confidence now looked like discomfort. Harris straightened in her chair, forcing control back into her voice. Senator, this is a serious proceeding. Don't misrepresent the purpose of this hearing. Kennedy tilted his head slightly, his drawl calm, almost courteous. Madam Vice President, I didn't misrepresent anything. I simply repeated your own words. If hearing them back sounds distorted, maybe that says more about the words than the echo. The room rippled again. Staffers traded glances. Reporters scribbled faster, cameras capturing every flicker of expression as Harris shifted in her seat. She tried once more, her tone sharpening. Senator Kennedy, this is not a debate stage. Kennedy leaned in, voice steady and clear. No. It's supposed to be a chamber of truth, and truth doesn't mind being heard. The buzz grew louder. The chairman glanced at his gavel, then lowered his hand. Realizing the moment had outgrown formality to iron the gallery, whispers spread fast. She lost it with that line. He flipped it back on her. A reporter murmured, "That's the headline." "That's going everywhere." Harris shuffled her notes, her tight smile betraying tension. Kennedy leaned back, folding his hands on the desk as if the exchange was already settled. His calm said everything her words could not. His calm composure stood in sharp contrast to her visible tension. For the first half hour, Harris had commanded the room with authority. Now, she appeared on the defensive, and Kennedy hadn't raised his voice once. The moment wasn't confined to the Senate floor. It had already escaped those marble walls. When Kennedy's line, "If repeating you feels like distortion, maybe that's the problem with the words, not the echo," landed, the chamber froze. But outside, the silence was already turning into noise. Reporters in the gallery weren't just taking notes. They were typing, sending alerts to editors who splashed breaking news banners across major outlets. Clash on Capitol Hill. Harris versus Kennedy. Sit down, boy, and the response that stunned the room. Within minutes, the clip hit Twitter, 38 seconds long. Harris leaning forward, voice sharp. Sit down, boy. Then Kennedy's calm drawl, his reminder of her own words, and the heavy silence that followed. It was raw. It was visual. It was viral. By the time Harris shuffled her papers on the desk, the clip had passed 250,000 views. By the time Kennedy leaned back in his chair, it had crossed 500,000. TikTok moved faster. Creators spliced the exchange into side-by-side edits. Harris's command against Kennedy's quiet reply, overlaid with captions like authority versus composure, and who really sat down tonight hashtag spread instantly. #SitDownBoy. #Kennedy clap back. #Harris vs. Kennedy. The ripple was immediate. Staffers along the wall glanced nervously at their phones, screens lighting up with notifications. Aides whispered updates. "It's trending already, #3 on Twitter." Harris pressed on, trying to steady herself. Her voice sharpened. "Higher now. Senator Kennedy is misrepresenting this moment. We are here to discuss judicial qualifications." But she wasn't controlling the story anymore. Broadcast producers across the country had already divided the screen. Harris mid-insult, Kennedy mid-reply. News anchors framed it as a defining moment of the hearing. One network Chiron read. Kennedy calmly counters Harris's sharp rebuke. Reporters in the gallery had stopped writing her statements entirely. Their pens only moved when Kennedy spoke. And Kennedy, he didn't chase the spotlight. He didn't gloat. He just sat still, composed, letting her raised tone clash against his quiet steadiness. The cameras loved the contrast. Across living rooms in America, families leaned closer to their screens. The sound bites were brief, but they hit hard point one phrase to diminish, one to reverse, one silence to end it. Cable shows interrupted regular programming with breaking coverage. Did Harris go too far? Talk radio replayed the insult and the reply on loop. Headlines shifted by the hour. Harris orders. Kennedy responds. Sit down. Boy backfires. Inside the chamber, Harris's allies tried to maintain composure, but the strain showed. One senator rubbed his forehead. Another stared fixedly at his notepad, avoiding the cameras. On Kennedy's side, his colleagues leaned back, silent, letting the moment breathe, knowing exactly what had just happened. The calm on Kennedy's face stood in brutal contrast to Harris's visible strain. For the first 30 minutes, she had seemed firmly in control. Now, she looked cornered, and Kennedy hadn't raised his voice once. The clip wasn't just spreading, it was exploding. And the wider it traveled, the more Harris's command appeared less like authority and more like overreach. The words had already gone viral. Now the expressions told the rest of the story. By the 25th minute, the Senate chamber felt less like a hearing and more like a courtroom after a verdict had been read. No one said it aloud, but the outcome was written across faces, in posture, and in the silence that filled the room. Harris sat stiffly, shoulders squared, chin high, but her eyes betrayed the tension. She flipped through her notes too quickly, pages snapping like cards. The cameras caught every flicker, each strained smile, each clenched jaw across from her. Kennedy barely moved. Hands folded loosely, eyes forward, calm as ever. The contrast was unmistakable. Harris looked like she was holding on. Kennedy looked like he had already won. Around them, senators told their own quiet story. One Democrat rubbed his temples, exhausted. Another pressed her lips tight, avoiding the cameras. On the Republican side, a staffer leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "That was the moment. She lost it with that line." Came the reply, eyes fixed on a phone where the clip now had millions of views. Reporters had stopped taking traditional notes. Most were typing rapid updates. Headline forming in real time. Kennedy calmly counters Harris. Sit down. Boy backfires. Viral exchange on Senate chamber. Photographers turned their lenses not toward whoever was speaking, but toward reactions. One shot caught Harris gripping the edge of her desk, knuckles white. Another showed Kennedy in profile, steady, lips curved in the faintest smile. Those images would fill front pages by morning. Even the chairman seemed to sense a shift. His gavel, once used to restore order, now sat untouched. No order was needed. The silence that followed Kennedy's words carried more weight than any gavel strike could. Miller, seated further down the dais, had smirked earlier. Now his grin was gone. He tapped his pen nervously, glancing from Harris to Kennedy, searching for an angle that had vanished. The whispers in the audience gallery weren't mocking Kennedy anymore. They were questioning Harris. A young staffer muttered just loud enough for reporters nearby to hear. She shouldn't have said that. The balance had completely shifted. No comment from Harris could undo the contradiction, erase the viral clip, or silence the reactions already unfolding online. The night clearly belonged to Kennedy, and he knew it. His stillness wasn't passive. It was deliberate. It was victory in quiet form. The exchange that began with a command ended with silence. Kamala Harris shuffled her papers, forcing composure back into her voice. She leaned toward her microphone, her words clipped and sharp. Senator Kennedy, we will continue with the questions that actually matter. But no one was listening anymore. Senators weren't leaning in. Reporters weren't writing. The moment had escaped the room. The clip, Harris's "sit down," boy followed by Kennedy's calm contradiction, had already taken on a life of its own. Kennedy leaned forward slowly, never raising his tone. His southern drawl carried through the chamber, measured and precise. "Madam Vice President, you told me to sit down, but I stand for the people who sent me here. And no matter what title you hold, I will not sit down when truth is at stake." The gallery stirred again. Reporters typed furiously. Cameras zoomed in on Harris, her jaw tight, her smile brittle. Kennedy let the silence linger, then closed with final precision. "You told me to sit down. But tonight, it was your words, not mine, that fell flat." The room froze. Harris didn't respond. She couldn't. The gavel didn't strike. It didn't have to. The silence itself was a verdict. Kennedy leaned back, folding his hands once more. No extra words. None needed. The duel was finished. Was Senator Kennedy right to counter Harris's command with such calm precision, or did he go too far? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you missed our last story, Stephen Miller interrupted Jasmine Crockett 6 times, and a 7th line shut him down. Go watch it now. Don't forget to hit subscribe, because the next exchange will be even bigger.